Steph, thank you so much for being here. I'm pumped up for this one.
Thanks for having me, man.
So in this world of relationships, intersexual dynamics, is there one concept, one idea that you really want to stress to people? Is there one like overarching idea that you really hope people understand at a fundamental level?
Well, I think there are many. You know, when it comes to intimate relating and when it comes to relationships, you know, one of the best things that we can do for ourselves and our partners, and not just our partners, but those that are close to us, right? Those that we actually care about, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a colleague, a dear friend, is the ability and the willingness to do our own inner work. In other words, to be more self-aware, to explore notions of how can we be showing up better in our relationships for ourselves and for others and for the entity of relationship itself. How can we do things differently? How can we work on our patterns that don't really serve us, that maybe are abrasive or impatient or push people away, or that carry fear of intimacy, fear of rejection, and therefore have us behaving in certain ways? I think that willingness to do our inner work is paramount in any relationship, but all parties have to come to the party, right?
It's an interesting idea. It's like that concept of saving yourself by saving the world by saving yourself. It's something that you see in your message. It's the only way, or how you treat yourself and how you show up with yourself is how you're going to show up in a relationship.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, man. I mean, I find that in my own personal life, in my own relationship, man, if my self-talk is abrasive and judgmental, if I am shaming myself, I will find that I carry a greater propensity to shame others, to be judgmental of others, to be quite hypercritical of others, and to have less patience with others because I don't have that patience with myself.
And it's one of those things, though, that's so much easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
How do you get to that point where you are, I want to say, more just loving with yourself?
Yeah. The pain of change needs to be less than the pain of remaining the same. Fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. And so if we see on the horizon somewhere that there is a change or transformation that we seek for ourselves, and we can somewhat see that being us or us embodying that at some level, usually what happens is the ego says, nope, we're not changing. That's unfamiliar territory. Better the devil you know, essentially, right? And we will fight and do everything we can to remain in familiarity because familiarity feels safe. So we learn ultimately to cultivate a greater sense of self and a greater resilience and courage by challenging ourselves, by doing things that are difficult and overcoming those things, and having many real life examples of doing tough stuff, getting through it, and relaying it to this moment and saying, well, if I did that then, maybe I can do this now. Maybe there is an opportunity for real change, and I'm at the precipice of it, and all I need to do is take the first step. What does that look like?
Have you ever heard of this region beta paradox?
No.
You heard of this?
Maybe. Tell me more.
So I think it's essentially, if you were to go a mile or less, you would walk. If you were to go 2 miles, you would drive. And so hypothetically, you would go 2 miles faster than you would go 1 mile. And it's almost in relation to what you were just saying, like, if your situation is comfortably numb or not awful, you're going to stay the same because if that you don't have that same hunger level that if the situation was miserable.
Yeah, I have heard of that before, and I forgot what it was called. But yes, that.
It's an interesting conversation, right? It's like, how do you raise the hunger level without making yourself more miserable in a way?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the paradox, right? I think the greater misery or suffering or pain, and parts of that is optional, but I don't think we can necessarily forego that completely. That's part of the issue.
I think that's such an important note.
We're attempting to bypass pain completely, or the challenge of that, or the misery or the suffering completely. I don't think we can. And I think when we move into some acceptance around this is going to be uncomfortable, I don't know what that level of discomfort is. However, I'm willing to take a chance, and I'm willing to sit with it, and I'm willing to work with it when it comes up. I'm willing to seek support when I need it. I'm willing to do that more difficult work. What often happens, again, paradoxically, is that pain, that intensity, it lessens. And we deepen our relationship to the process. And what we start to find and what we start to come into greater acceptance of is that pain is part of the process. It's not the entire process, but it's part of the process. So can we embrace that just like we embrace the joyous moments or the pleasant moments or the desirable moments that come to us in life through change and transformation, but also just by being in life?
I love that note because it's almost the avoidance of pain that causes those issues to begin with.
I think that's a fair point to make.
Yeah. When we were setting up in here, the audio engineer, he asked me who I was recording with, and I told him you, and he was familiar with your work.
Oh,
and nice. I said, do you have any questions that you would want to ask him? And he was like, ooh, he's probably going to take the conversation some interesting directions, but I'd be curious, since he's a very unique thinker and very different in some ways, what he thinks people in the self-help industry that he's in kind of get wrong with things, since he's a unconventional thinker.
Well, firstly, I'm very humbled by that commentary. I feel very, very grateful to receive that. So thank you. I think I sort of did a post on this. A couple of days ago as a small piece that I wrote on this. I think what a lot of the self-help industry gets wrong or could do better, and I started this way as well, so I can really empathize, is there's too much fakeness. There's this belief that if you're in the self-help industry and you're a leader in the industry, that you need to have it all together. You have to be perfect. And that's dangerous, man. It's just like false advertising. It's just like when we see these models or these people that look a particular way and we think that's the standard of being human, when that's not necessarily the case. And beauty and aesthetics there's a level of subjectivity to that anyway, right? But put that aside for a moment. But these false icons that we adore and we put on a pedestal, self-help industry does that a little bit. And it's got to be made clear, we're human. We're all human and we all have human experiences. And if we're living in this world, we're collecting content. In other words, we're collecting experiences that are shaping us, but that are also activating us in different ways. For example, I've done a lot of deep, attentive work to my relationship with my parents. When my daughter came into my life and I became a parent in that way, some of that old stuff that I'd worked through, that I thought I had completed, came up again, came to my awareness again. I saw behaviors come out of me, come through me, that I hadn't really been like that for many years. And so, time to go down the rabbit hole again. Or not, but for me it was time to revisit that. And so, that from that part, if you're a practitioner or a leader in the self-help industry, I think it's really important to be real with who you are and where you're at. It doesn't mean you have to wear your heart on your sleeve. It doesn't mean you have to share every ill story or challenge or difficulty that you're facing, but don't pretend that you have it all together, because you don't. I definitely don't. I think the other part with the self-help industry is that we think it's a magic bullet, and it's not. It's a support mechanism, and ultimately, no one can do the work for you. People can only support you on certain parts of your journey. That's at least my experience and my belief around this. And there are many aspects of one's journey that must be traversed in solitude, not alone in loneliness or isolation, but in solitude. And there's value to that. And there's value in seeking help and support. Mm-hmm. So I would say those two big points, fake gurus and self-help industry isn't a magic bullet.
I want to dive into both of those, but I think we should start with the first point that you made about kind of coming across as this perfect person. And it's this overall epidemic with social media that we're seeing on a more global scale is, especially with younger people, they idolize these people and they put them on a pedestal in a way that, one, I don't think is healthy for their own self-esteem, and two, I think is causing a lot of damage for them and what they think they should show up as in this world. And it's a little terrifying when you think about it and the direction we're heading in. And it's interesting. I'd be curious on your perspective from a relationship standpoint. It's like we're getting to this very, especially with people who are very good looking, there's a plethora of options, and it's becoming real. People don't have the same, they don't feel obligated to settle down because there's, or if they do settle down, there's 10 other options on their phone that they could hop onto whenever anything gets hard. Yes, exactly. So it's this, it's causing a very interesting dynamic that I don't think we've ever really explored before in human nature.
Let me address the first part around, false prophets and the pedestalization of these social media gurus and individuals. Really, that's an unresolved extension of us as children pedestalizing our parents and our parents falling from grace because they're human. Mm-hmm. And that part of us that wants someone to be our savior. And so we look to icons in our industry or in our space or in social media or in Hollywood or whatever it may be, right? Or in politicians or in other family members or in our partners. Part of that is unresolved trauma around that issue. Part of that is low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-accredited value. And until we move into deeper levels of self-love and until we become more, not about becoming self-sufficient, because I'm a big proponent of healthy relationship. I think we grow in healthy relationship. I've seen that in my life. I've seen that in pretty much everyone that I work with, irrespective of the nature of the relationship, as long as it's healthy and there are, I guess, parameters that lend itself to the definition of a healthy relationship. However, when we're in relationship, we grow, right? We learn from each other. So I'm not opposed to relationship. I'm not saying that you have to be in self-love and only self-love. What I'm saying is that there is something that continues having us idolize others as opposed to going within ourselves and noticing the value that we carry. And Dr. John DeMartini says, own the traits of the greats. If you admire someone in the world, it could be a sports athlete or star, it could be a politician, it could be a leader or a business leader of an innovative company, it could be whoever it may be, right? What traits do they carry that you're noticing that you may have and hold within yourself? Because you're noticing them because at some level you hold them within you as well. And I'm not saying you can't admire that person, but to pedestalize them in unhealthy ways where you're giving them all this power, for what? Maybe you could direct that power within just a little more. And there's a harmonizing, balancing act there. But we will never get to that if we don't step back out of ourselves for a moment and really look at what is this idolization.
That's an interesting point about holding those traits within ourselves, and that's part of the reason why we idolize these people in a way. It's not a perspective I've heard before. It's not a perspective I've thought about, is that because the reason why you admire that about that person is because you hold it in yourself.
At least a shade of it. At least a shade of it. Yeah, an aspect of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
A percentage of it.
Yep. And so the second half of that, which is the transactional aspects of relationships, how in the work that you've done, and I'm sure you get a lot of messages and talk with a lot of people, are you freaked out at all with like the direction that that's heading in?
To clarify, you're specifically referring to us as individuals becoming largely a society where we think there's
better options out there.
Yeah, we don't need to commit. We don't need to lean into relationship. The moment it gets difficult, we're checked out because there's the perception of so much option out there that I can do better, or I don't need this difficulty. And, if the relationship's hard, it's not the relationship for me, that type of thing. Yeah, I'm concerned about that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a solution?
Yeah, I do think there's a solution. I think there's many solutions. And I think it begins with what I shared at the beginning around being responsible for doing our own inner work. I also understand that there's more at play here than necessarily we can see. And what I mean by that specifically is maybe there's some soul line stuff happening. In other words, that individual has very specific soul curriculum that they're coming into this world in this lifetime with, and this particular existence that needs to be expressed in a very specific way, and until they're ready to shift that, if they're ever ready to shift that, maybe they're not meant to shift that, and it's beyond my understanding as to why. Just because I have an idea of what's better or a better relating format, it may not be right for what they need in this world at this time. That doesn't mean I'm not going to share my perspective, or I don't want others to share their perspective. I do, because again, I value learning and growing. I want to grow through learning new things. I also want to grow through identifying with a particular belief system or holding a particular reality and deepening that reality, but then also being shown other realities as well. Not everyone wants that. Some people just like to be where they're at. I think it is an epidemic. I think it's a problem for... It causes us to remain stuck in the shallows and in the surface level of relating. There's nothing wrong with that. However, there's just no progression into greater depth. But depth can be risky, it can be scary. So most people don't want to go to depth. Intimacy has been unsafe for them growing up. Intimacy has shown them that it's not safe to be close to someone. It can come with violence, it can come with rejection, it can come with abandonment, it can come with humiliation. And so it's easy to stay on surface level. And a lot of people get a kick from, they get a hit, I should say, they get that dopamine hit from the peak experience of sex and the peak experience of novelty and variety. So from a biological level, a physiological level, we're spending time, whether we're having sex or not, but we're spending time with new people, new partners, and there's this rush, this limerence phase that we're in, this honeymoon period, and there's this hormonal rush that goes through the body. And we sometimes mistake that for depth of intimacy. It's not necessarily that. It's simply this physiological rush related to variety and novelty. And so when that wears off and more of the real self or the whole self comes through, because we've also come together not just for pleasure, sexual pleasure or physical pleasure or joy and fun, external pleasures, existential pleasures, we've maybe come together to heal some old wounds that the partner will activate within us. And if we're conscious and aware and mature enough, we'll work through those things. But most of us are unaware of that. I spent most of my life being unaware of what was actually happening when I was in repetitive conflict with my partners. That were patterns coming up over and over again, and I was the common denominator. I was unaware to that. I was ignorant to that. And so when we are willing to do that inner work, we can grow through that part of what we need to grow out of. That doesn't mean we'll stay together. We may, but we may not. But at least when the relationship ends, it ends on more firmer grounds and both people have grown. And they go into their next relationship a newer, more empowered, greater version of themselves. What I'm seeing happening, and this is a generalization, of course, is that, plenty of fish in the sea, all good, I'll just go somewhere else. Sure, and how's that serving you?
Mm-hmm. So with that said, what would be the reason then to commit again to a long-term relationship when it is hard, when the variety is fun and you do get those dopamine hits from variety? What is the beauty in committing?
Well, you can create variety, for starters, in many ways in your life. It doesn't just have to be through sexual partners or new partners, right? So you can create variety, novelty in various ways. The come from really matters. So are you in a position in your life where you want to commit to a long-term relationship? You may not want to, and you may not need to. You may be in a stage in your life where you don't need commitment into a long-term relationship, and you don't need that kind of depth. You can pursue, or you can embody other depth in your life in other ways, right? Or maybe not. Maybe you're in a stage in your life where you're not. The come from really matters. And so if you're running from commitment, and you hold a fear of commitment, you hold a fear of depth, and you hold a fear of intimacy, that's telling you that you're running from that thing. So the actions that you're taking, the pleasure that you're seeking, is a compensation. It's a compensatory strategy to get you away from the thing you don't want to feel. Too much pain, I need more pleasure. This is how I'm seeking it. If your come from is, I'm making a very mature choice to not be in committed relationship right now because I'm building other things, I'm interested in other things, and I feel that knowing myself in the way that I do, I want to reevaluate this in 1 year's time or 3 years' time. Very different come from, as long as it's genuine, right?
Yep.
You're not being disingenuous. The come from really matters. Because I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, if you're non-committal, you're wrong, you're bad, you're immature, you're less than, you're not spiritual, whatever. No, not at all, not at all. But if your come from is coming from running, compensation, hiding, avoidance, could be something for you to look at. Because if you continue that pattern, you'll just continue that pattern.
Absolutely. It's brings up a very interesting conversation. It's I think that that's something that I've probably decided for myself, is that like I'm in this time of growth and in study and in trying to level up and really improve myself as an individual so that I can be fit to be that guy I want to show up as in a relationship. And I think that, you know, you see a lot of stuff on the internet now from younger guys about like monk mode. I don't know. Have you heard about this? These younger
It's
kids.
part of the men's rights movement. Men's movement.
Yeah, exactly. They have this perspective that the answer to their problems is locking themselves in their basement and grinding away until they come out with all this money and success, blah, 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 and they think that that's going to solve their problems. And it's something that you're starting to see time and time again with these younger guys as a real thing that they're striving for. Is it misguided?
You know, when I'm asked questions like that, is it misguided? It's a very valid and it's a great question. I often revert to, you know, who am I to tell someone the path that they're choosing is misguided? And I genuinely mean that, right? Like, what the fuck do I know? I don't know your life, that person's life, the person in the basement's life. I'd say for some people, probably fewer than most, that's the path they need to take. For others, it's a path of avoidance. At the end of the day, if we're making very active choices about who we want to be and how we want to be in the world, we need to own those choices. There's great power and a sense of empowerment. There's great growth that comes from owning our choices, right? However, I will say that the scenario you described is connected to this notion that hyper external success is connected to the intrinsic value of a man. That's the fucking problem. Yep. That we are not worth anything unless we're delivering external value, or unless we have a lot of money, or we've built businesses, or we have empires, or whatever it's called, right? Whatever you want to put around that, or our status says A, B, and C, or we have X amount of social media followers, whatever. There's a problem with that because enough will often never be enough. Mm-hmm. And that's not the only value of any human being. Sure, there's value in that, but it's not the only value that we carry. There's a really cool song, man. It gets me quite emotional sometimes, most of the time actually. It's a song by, his name is Dax. It's called To Be a Man. It's a really interesting song. It's got a cool tune to it as well. Have a listen to it when you get a chance.
Yeah, I would love to.
If you're interested. Try and sit in a quiet place and just headphones on and just have a listen to it. But it speaks to some of the 4.5 minute song, but it speaks to some of the struggles that men face and the loneliness and the emptiness that they feel. And we think, you know, when we pursue, and I've been in this place, and sometimes I'm in and out of this place still, man, as a man as well, right? But there used to be a time in my life where I would be really down on myself, and I'd say, damn, you know, I'm 30 years old and I should be here and I should be doing this, or I'm 25 years old and I should be doing this, or I'm 35 years old and I should be here and I should be in this place and I shouldn't have this issue. And I always thought many years ago, well, if I only had this, then everything would be okay. Not really. I take myself wherever I go. So having a whole bunch of money in the bank, I mean, it's helpful. I like it. It's great. But it also does breed more complications. And what I've realized is that what's really fundamentally shifted my internal attitude and the value that I place on myself, the way that I see myself, is my inner work. It's not how much money I have in the bank. It's not the car I drive. It's not what I own. It really isn't. It's how I see myself. And how I see myself isn't predicated upon those things. It's actually predicated upon, for me personally, the deep inner work that I've done and the confronting situations I have faced within myself, the aspects of me I've met, the darkness within me, the light within me, all of it, the deep shadow work that I've done. And shadow work isn't only dark work, it's light work as well. It's coming to greater communion and relationship with the parts of me that I'd lost, that I'd forgotten about, that I gave away, that were taken from me. That's where I've really cultivated deeper value and worth. And then my aspirations to create certain things in the world come from a very different place. They don't come from lack and deficit and insecurity. They come from excitement, creativity, and expansiveness, man. Mm-hmm. I get up in the morning and I'm fucking excited to create in the world, and I'm excited to be with my baby girl, my daughter. I'm excited to see my family and spend time with her. I'm just excited about life. I'm a clearer vessel. That's why.
I think it's one of those things that for a lot of people, what's that expression? It's something along the lines of it's easier to get the Ferrari than to not want the Ferrari.
Yeah, it's a great expression, man. It's so true.
It's so true.
So true, man. It is. And I battle with that as well. I'll give you just very real example. So I love watches. I mean, this is just my not just, it's a great watch, a Garmin Mark II. This is for my biometrics, right? Yeah. My sleep and all my performance and everything else. But I love watches. I love not dress watches. I love timepieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I've loved timepieces since I was young in my teens. I used to live in Perth, in Australia, and I'd spend a lot of time in Indonesia and Thailand, and they sold a lot of fake watches there. So they sold fake watches of really high-level brands, right? So I'd always buy these fake watches, and I think I was 28 years old or something, and I gave all the fake watches away. I threw some of them away. They didn't work. I said, I'm not buying a watch until I can afford it, like a proper watch. That wasn't until maybe like 2-3 years ago, right? And I've started my collection now. I was in Vegas just over the weekend. I took my wife to see the U2 concert for her birthday, a belated birthday gift. She loves U2, loves U2. It was a great time. We were in and out very quick. It was the first time leaving our baby girl, and that was difficult for her, but it was good. It was a good time away. And she was having a rest in the afternoon, and I went just for a little walk, and I stopped at a Watches of Switzerland. It's a global shop. Spent a couple of hours there with the sales guy, Joe. Great guy. And at some point I'll get a watch from him soon, I'd say. But then I just wanted to get all the watches.
Oh, I know.
I wanted to get all the watches. I literally wanted to spend, I don't know, probably $300,000-$400,000 on watches there that I liked. I genuinely liked. There's about 5 or 6 timepieces, maybe 4 or something like that. So I had to stop myself from obviously getting all of them, but even getting one because I just wanted to sit with it. So I can really resonate with like the impulse of that. And I have an impulsive personality. I have an addictive personality, for lack of a better term, right? It's just a familiar term for people. So I have that. So I'm not in constant battle with that, but I am in relationship with that part of me, right? And doing things slower and actually saying, I don't really need it. I want it. It doesn't mean I can't have it, but do I need it right now? Mm-hmm. And just being in deeper curiosity with that part of me. But it's a fascinating conversation, man, internally for me.
I think the why behind it is so important, right? It's like, why do you want that timepiece? For you, it seems like it's coming from a genuine love and fascination with watches versus
infatuation. Yeah. I'm man, the way these horological experts, these watchmakers make these watches, and I'll be honest with you, man, it's fantastic. I can
fascinating.
I can wear a $100,000 watch on my wrist. The vast majority of people will have no idea that it's that. I don't really do it for. Yes. Most people comment on this watch. Yep. It's got a white band. It's a nice watch, right? Then they do on when I'm wearing my nice watches.
Yep.
It's really I very much. I'm fascinated, man. I'm obsessed. Yes.
I think it's so important though to know where that desire for that watch is coming from, because for a lot of people it's not coming from a place of genuine fascination with the watch itself, but of what other people are going to think of me when I'm wearing this watch.
Yeah.
And understanding what that reason is behind the watch provides a lot of insight into
it. Does. Yeah, and you got me thinking a little more now as well. And part of it, I remember when I got my first Audemars Piguet, and it's a beautiful watch. They've been watchmakers for a long time. And I felt really accomplished, man. I felt really, it was symbolic for me of, wow, I'm living the life that I've really always dreamed, that I can afford a watch like this very comfortably and be in a privileged position to be able to purchase it in the way that I did as well through the boutique. I'm very grateful for that relationship, and it was just very symbolic of the work that I had to do, not only the external work but the internal work to get to that position. So it's very much symbolic of a personal journey for me, and it's also just a hobby and a fascination. some people have fascinations with other things, and so do I. I have fascination with climbing mountains and being in nature and traversing new lands that I haven't been exposed to, and adventure and nature and all those things. I have many hobbies, and this is just one of them for me. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you have a little baby daughter now.
Yeah, she's not a baby anymore. She's a full-blown toddler, and she's the best, man. She's 19 months, nearly 20 months old, actually.
But I'm particularly curious on what being a dad has done for you, because you're such a aware and spiritual dude that I feel like you have you're very keenly aware to how that has changed you as a person.
Very much so, man. It's very much changed me is what I meant by that. It's very much continuing to change me and shift me. And it's been the greatest expansive gift I've received, and one of the greatest challenges I've been through and continue to go through, in terms of, touched on a little earlier around, what it's bringing up for me and what it's revealing about me, and some of the self-doubt that's coming through. Am I good enough to be a father? Do I have what it takes? I want to be a father, and I want to be a father to my baby girl, and I'm obsessed with her. I love her so deeply, and my heart is open so much. It's really helping me heal some of my fears around intimacy that I've had in my life and continue to have as well. I think it's helping me really unblock some of that. I don't think, I know it is, which is bringing me closer to my wife as well. So there's a lot there, and that comes with more challenges often having a child, especially the first child, as we adapt, and the people that we both are as well. It's been extremely difficult, and it's been extremely enlightening and humbling and expansive and beautiful, and I can't imagine my life without her. At the same time, it's all the things, man. It really is. It's all the things. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I almost can't imagine, because it's such
Do you want children?
Do I want?
Do you want children?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm only 23 now, though, so it does feel like a little bit away. But
what a boss, man! I wish I had your demeanor and your maturity. And I don't say that from a place of regret. I say it from a place of compliment to you. I wish I had your maturity, demeanor, and your energetic when I was 23. I mean, you're doing great things, man.
I appreciate that. But I think it ultimately goes back to kind of what we were saying when we started this conversation. I mean, I owe all of the person I am right now to having a autoimmune skin condition when I was 16. And I had to learn how to overcome that myself and figure out how to cure that with diet and all that stuff. And I really do think that with all that stuff, the obstacles away, and like these concepts that you were talking about of healing yourself makes you just show up so much better in this world. And it's a message I can relate to. And I think that that's the reason why I'm able to be doing this.
What are you doing? What are you building in the world right now that you're very passionate about? Do you have space for a partner in your life? Do you want a partner in your life right now? Because I heard you say earlier, maybe not, that you're focused on building.
I mean, I was, but I feel a bit more settled now in terms of myself. And, I've kind of worked through all that autoimmune stuff, and that's kind of a non-issue in my life now. So I feel a lot more settled into the person I am. So I'd be open to it. It's not something I'm actively seeking. I don't feel the need to go out there and like really try to look for that partner, but I'm open to it. I'm open to it.
And you're not hiding from the world either, like this monk mode.
I'm not, but in a way, like it's interesting because I'm not a guy who loves to go out and drink. And outside of that dynamic, it's interesting that it almost feels like you're hiding because you're not going out and partying on the weekends all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is that the scene right now? I mean, it was when I'm 41.
Yeah.
So when I was your age and in my late teens and so forth, that was the vibe, man. It doesn't seem to have changed, where on the weekends you go out, you get drunk, you do what you do, and party, you dance, you do drugs, you drink, you have sex, you don't, whatever. But you're out with your friends. Is that the only way to meet people?
I don't think so. No.
Think so.
It isn't. It's
is
probably
that what many of
easiest.
your friends are doing though? Or
Yeah.
Your circles?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think I've came almost full circle to that point now where I'm much more open to doing that. And like I think that there's a beauty in that now. Whereas like at the start when I was really so focused on health and optimizing all that stuff, I thought that wasn't something I had any interest in, but now I kind of see the beauty and the fun in it. So I'm open to it. It's not something I'm like actively avoiding nowadays, but I think it's like just comes down to what you value. I love that this concept from Mark Manson of thinking about what things your ideal partner does. Like, do they go to a yoga class? Do they go to a book club? Or just like random things of placing yourself in those similar environments. I think that's a helpful thing.
I always say, do what you love. If you love yachting, go and do yachting. If you love yoga, do yoga. You love going to the gym, go to the gym. Like, do the things that are in alignment with what you value in life, what experiences you wish to have, whether it's traveling, whatever it is. And just know that you're exposing yourself to like-minded, like-hearted people. You're increasing the chances of that. And that just becomes a base and a foundation to meet people that are in greater alignment with who you are and who you want to be in relationship and how you want to be in relationship.
So with all that said, like at 23 where I am right now, is there a message that outside of the stuff we've already talked about that you would want to stress to me or just that those men at that age in general?
So if we look at us as humans, both women and men, and just us as humans, at that age developmentally, early 20s, mid 20s, you're really establishing yourself in the world. Your brain is still growing, man. I mean, brain doesn't really stop growing until 25, 27, particularly for men, maybe even a little older. I think maybe it could be 28, 29. So you're still developing physiologically. Doesn't mean you're a baby. Of course you're a man. Of course you're an adult. And you're still finding your feet at some level. And by the way, we go through stages in our life where we're still finding our feet. You could be 40 and you're finding your feet again. Maybe you found your feet, now you're re-finding them again. You're re-identifying with who you are in the world, right? But at this age, I would say just really be you. Do the things that you dream about. I'll give you an example. When I was 19 moving into 20, I said, I want to travel the world, but I don't have the money to travel the world. How am I going to do it? I'm going to work on cruise ships. I just went and worked on cruise ships. That's it, done. 2 years was on cruise ships. I was in doctor's office, again, before I was leaving to go to Europe, to go to work on cruise ships. And I hadn't even had a job yet. I just got a one-way ticket to Europe and I was just going to figure it out. And I opening up this magazine, I saw Machu Picchu. I said, I'm definitely going to go there. 10 months later, I'm there. I just put myself in positions where I could experience the life I wanted to experience on my terms. So have rich, diverse life experiences. Get curious about life. Get curious about yourself. Be in a relationship, be out of a relationship, be single. Spend a good amount of time being single, discovering more of yourself. Be honest. Be truthful. Surround yourself with good friends and good people. Eat good food. Just enjoy. Not to say that when you're in a relationship, you're not going to enjoy yourself. It's going to be a different level of enjoyment. That's all it is. It's just different. It's a different experience that you're sharing with someone else. And when you get to know yourself more, you're going to start to define the relationship that you want to be in. What do I mean by that? Do you want full monogamy? Do you want partial monogamy? Do you want non-monogamy? What affliction or shade of non-monogamy do you want? What does partnership look like and feel like for you? What are your non-negotiables in relationship? Like, you have a real opportunity to get to know yourself and through your experiences. And if there's things that you're passionate about, life experiences that you wish to have, don't wait to have them. Fucking get out there and have them, man. You want to go to South Africa for 6 months to check out, go to South Africa for 6 months. Don't even really plan it or give it any thought, just go. Things change as you get older, not for the better or worse, they just change. Better or worse is a judgment call that we place on it when we're not fully connected to ourselves and we don't trust ourselves and we don't know ourselves. And the other side of that coin is that sometimes it is more intense. But don't be a victim to your circumstances. Create your life. Establish that pattern and that habit now. Do the things that are really whatever dreams you've got, and you may have 3 or 4 big competing dreams. Well, choose one to go with and just go for it now. Paralysis by analysis. Don't be there. Yeah, you may look back in 15 years and go, oh, damn, I wish I chose that dream, but at least you chose a dream. That's a bit of a rant that I would say.
It was a beautiful rant. That was an incredible rant. I think that a lot of guys, what's stopping them from doing that is this need or this societal pressure that they feel to get a job and to walk on this path. Why shouldn't they do that? Why should guys go out and not? Because I was having a conversation with a friend and he hasn't found a job yet, and I was like, dude, you should go be a barista in Europe for a little bit, explore, go have some fun, because he's a huge traveler and I know he has that desire to do so. But he's like, yeah, but I don't want to look back in 10 years and be ready to start a family and still be a barista. And I was like, fair, but I think there's something to be said about that exploration.
I'll share a story with you. It's not really a story. It's more of a personal practice. I often look through the lens. I look at life through the lens of, I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I want to put myself in that position to experience it. So let's just say you and I were talking and you told me that, and I was, circa 23 and I'm in that position. The way I would, even back then, how I would approach that would be, maybe I meet someone, and not a partner necessarily. Maybe I meet someone and we go into business together and we develop these chain of coffee shops or whatever. I start getting creative with all the things that could happen and all the people I could meet, all the opportunities that may present themselves. That's what I did when I was 19, 20 years old, as an example. And by the way, let me say something else to your original question of what guidance, advice, what would you say, in addition to what you shared earlier. I would say as well, if you want to go and make millions of dollars, go and make millions of dollars too. If you want to establish yourself and be financially successful and be financially secure and abundant, and then invest your money and retire at the age of 25 or 28 or 30, do that too. Part of me wishes I was more diligent with money making when I was younger as well. And I don't want to say it's a regret, but I struggled with money for a very long time, up until the age of really 35, 36. So most of my life wasn't until coming to the US and meeting my partner I was on the way there anyway, but really having someone that believed in me and the opportunity that presented itself here in the USA, and obviously my drive and my skill set. And I was a small fish in a very small pond in Perth, and I was a very small fish in a very big pond here in the US, but I had drive and tenacity, right? And I still do. I'm very driven. I'm very creative. I'm very generative. My generative patterning is very strong within me. But I would say to you as well, if you want to go make cash, go make cash. Do it. Fuck yeah. Do all of it. Do all of it. That's the thing. You can. Yeah. You don't have commitments outside of whatever your commitments are. You don't have a family. Like you don't have a partner. You don't have children. They're big commitments. They're not anchors. They're not drag you downs. Not at all. But you don't have that now. So there's a level of openness that you have that you wouldn't have if you had that initially, at least, right? Go do all the things you want to do and establish yourself. Make those foundations. Like create those foundations now. I was able to take a substantial amount of time off because of the life I created for myself when I had my daughter, so I could spend more time with her. Very grateful for that. If you can do that now, even earlier,
do it.
Magic.
Yeah. I fell in love with this quote. You have to be the reckless prince to become the wise king.
Yes.
Beautiful. And I think it illustrated perfectly in what you just said, is this almost going with the wind and being a bit reckless and doing all these things. It's how you develop wisdom at the end of the day.
Yeah. Through learning, through contrast.
Yeah. And so you mentioned different shades of monogamy and having clarity in terms of what you want in a relationship. What is your thoughts on that world of polyamory? You hear a lot of stuff nowadays of people doing different things in their relationships and approaching it differently. What has been, in learning a lot about this and in studying relationships, what are your thoughts on monogamy?
Yeah. No wrong or right. Come from. What you come from. Are you in non-monogamy because you're avoiding? Are you in monogamy because you're hiding or you're scared? Or it's an entrenched value system? You think, your parents said, hey, you got to get married and you got to have kids and you've got to have a white picket fence and you've got to do this and you've got. Not that's what monogamy is. I'm giving you a generalization. I'm giving you it's a
example.
An example, right? It depends on come from, and there's really no wrong or right. There's alignment, there's misalignment. What works for you, what doesn't. if we take into account our biology, our biology tends to lean more towards non-monogamy, or at the very least, variations of monogamy that include non-monogamy, if that makes sense. So it could be you have an emotional primary partner, you have a primary partner that you live with and that you spend life with and you do life with, and then the sexual component is more varied, as an example of many examples. At the end of the day, in partnership, or however many people are in your partnership, you dress it up how you want.
Yeah.
You make those agreements how you want to make those agreements. At the end of the day, whether you're in monogamy or non-monogamy, there's still cheating and dishonesty in non-monogamy. Because if you have agreements and boundaries and you break those, then you're quote unquote cheating or you're being dishonest. Just because you're in a non-monogamous relationship, it doesn't mean that doesn't happen. So you've just got to get really, really clear on what you want and what works for you. I will say this though, the more, you heard that saying, too many cooks spoil the broth?
No, I don't think I've ever heard
Have you ever
that
heard that saying, too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay. So too many cooks in the kitchen, right? It's too much fuckery. One cook, one leader, that's enough.
Yeah.
Too many personalities in one space. Like there's, okay, so warship, right? I'll use that as an example. There's usually one leader on the warship, right?
Yeah.
One captain, and then there's staff captain, and then but there's one captain.
Mm-hmm.
There's not 15 leaders there. So in non-monogamy, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
It gets very layered. There's going to be far more attention. There's going to be deeper agreements. There's going to be deeper levels of communication. Not any deeper than monogamy, just different. We just have to take all those things into account. And what's your disposition? What's your personal disposition? Are you good with handling all that? Do you want to handle all that? Is that too much chaos for you? Are you addicted to chaos? And what you come from around that, do you have a sex addiction and that's why you're in non-monogamous relationship? Or you genuinely want to explore this part of you and it feels very genuine to you? Come from really matters. Who the fuck am I to tell you, no, that's wrong or that's right? That's what works for you. I will say to you, I will ask you, what you come from? What's your honest come from? Don't even tell me. I don't even care.
Yeah.
For you, what's your honest come from? Because that will help you determine, are you in the right container or not, relationship container.
I've been following and listening to Aubrey Marcus's podcast for a long time now, and it's been fascinating to see his evolution in that realm and some of the pitfalls that he experienced in trying to do polyamory and the weirdness and confusion and chaos that created in his own life and insecurity within himself, and to see him be this advocate of polyamory and then with time move over towards a more monogamous relationship. It's fascinating to see, and it makes me realize that is no easy. Like I think that phrase that you use, "There are too many chefs in the kitchen," it definitely makes sense. I could see it getting complicated quick.
It often does. And then, again, that's a beautiful opportunity to work through stuff, right? It's a beautiful opportunity to tend to some needs and tend to some traumas, maybe, if it's done in a aligned way. But ultimately, that's just the nature of relationship, of healthy relating, irrespective of what the container looks like.
What are your thoughts on psychedelics?
I'm an advocate and proponent of plant medicine and plant sacrament. Even synthetic. I wouldn't call that plant medicine or sacrament, but even psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Synthetic psychedelics. I started my journey with psychedelics and plant medicine late in my 30s, and then I went pretty deep.
Yep.
And I continue to utilize sacrament in various ways. I'm I'd like to believe I am and think I'm very respectful with sacrament. I think it's misused in the Western world. I think it's misunderstood. An example of that, and I've written a number of different essays on this, long form essays as well, small theses, 3, 4, 5,000 words. When plant medicine was used hundreds of years ago, pre-industrial era, our physical environment was very different.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Think about
just toxins in our waterways, pollution, the way the world worked, the fast pace of the world, the advent of electricity in that way. And things were different. Our connection to nature was different. The use was different. It was administered and given by spiritual leaders of tribal groups. There was potentially a deeper connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's commercialized a little bit now. That comes with an infusion of a very particular energetic. So there's something to be said for that. So I think we're too fast in it, right? And for most people, I don't want to say there's more trauma now than there was a few hundred years ago. I think that's an inaccurate statement. The trauma that we experience now is different.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a great deal of unresolved trauma in them. And going to psychedelics, especially if the environment and the practitioner holding space for that experience is not in integrity and congruent with themselves and the medicine, it's accelerating people's trauma. So trauma is often too much, too soon, too fast. Healing cannot happen in the same way. We must really heal in familiar states of consciousness. So when I really went deep into myself, I spent years doing that first before I went into psychedelics. And psychedelics became confirmatory for me as opposed to something that was deeply revealing and fucking intense. I went through my intensity in familiar states of consciousness without the use of substances to change my consciousness or shift my consciousness. So again, I'm an advocate for it, massive advocate in so many different ways. I just believe it's very much misused for the large part in Western society and misunderstood.
I agree. I think that the energetic component of it is quite fascinating, like you were describing. And especially the way we've demonized it and viewed it as there's been a lot of propaganda in terms of thinking that it's going to ruin your brain and mess you up big time. So people bring that energy into their experience, which affects it. And I think that before industrialization, it was the healthiest and soundest of minds who were the ones that were allowed to participate in sacrament. Whereas nowadays, we're kind of flipping that. And yeah. I don't know if that's, I don't have an opinion on that, but it's just fascinating note.
It's risky.
It's risky.
It's risky to have someone that's borderline personality disorder or borderline schizophrenic or recovering addict moving into other substances. It's I think we should be cautious.
Yeah. And a lot of the work you do revolves around breathwork as well.
It's one modality that I focus on, for sure, yeah.
And why breathwork? And it seems like breathwork has a very interesting component in emotional release and in the stuff that you work with. And why have you relied on breathwork in your practice?
Saved my life. I probably would have killed myself if a practitioner didn't come to me. A friend of mine rang me up one day and said, "Hey, you should see this lady. She's really great. She does breath work." I said, "Yeah, sure." Hadn't completely given up hope, but I was close. And it just changed the trajectory of my life.
Where were you at that point in life?
In Australia.
How old were you?
So probably about 10 years ago.
And what has switched in that time?
Oh, man. Self-belief, self-worth, darkness that I was feeling feels like it's lifted. Patterns of impatience, abrasiveness, aggression. I still have them, but they're so much more. They're just softer. I'm in greater relationship with them, in greater communion with these patterns that are harsh to my character and my demeanor, that are intense. Deeper levels of self-acknowledgement and self-love and self-awareness. I think I said this, but deeper levels of belief around what I can accomplish, create, embody in my life. And it wasn't just because of that breathwork session, but it's since then. I think if I understood your question correctly, since the inception of that time and many other beautiful experiences I've had with other practitioners and on my own as well, including being in intimate relationships, there's been a lot of shift.
What was it about that breathwork session that was the turning
just
point?
Beautiful, non-judgmental, compassionate space that guided me really profoundly and gave me an opportunity to just fully release. And I just had a visceral release like no other.
What does that mean?
It means that I had an emotional release, a visceral release in my body.
What'd that look like?
Screaming, howling, crying, shouting, purging, not vomiting, but dry reaching, moving my body in almost uncontrollable, unconscious ways, just releasing energy, movement and sound.
Have you had multiple of those experiences, or yeah? How do you reconcile an experience like that? Like, what is going on there?
I mean, now I know what's going on. There are a number of things that need to happen for that to happen. You have to feel safe enough in your nervous system and in your body and your being to allow yourself to go to that place. And sometimes that's unexplainable what makes that safe. It's a combination of the environment, the timing, the practitioner, where you're at, words exchanged, non-verbal cues absorbed, etc., etc. There's so many things that impact that. The breath technique can be very useful. Particular techniques will touch certain parts of the hippocampus, the lower regions of the hippocampus that are responsible for holding unconscious memory, thought, emotion, etc. That can then be released. That breath technique can also stimulate the pineal gland and stimulate the release of DMT as well. And again, if you feel safe enough, you just have an emotional release often. It's not always cathartic. Sometimes you have visions. Sometimes you have very calm sense of self and a sense of peace that you feel. Sometimes you fall asleep. It just really depends on what you need, where you're at. So many factors impact that. But ultimately how you reconcile that is through integration. So having a very sound practitioner that can support you in integrating that, because it can be a very confronting experience. Self-care is very important post that experience. And then working with someone on a regular basis, a coach, a guide, someone that you can reflect back to, that you can get support with as things come up, as information comes up to you that's maybe new, right? As thoughts come up, as ideas come up, as you start thinking and feeling about your experience more. And then continuity in growing, continuity in exposing yourself to experiences where you can move energy, where you can get curious, where you can share your feelings and your thoughts as well. That's all part of it.
Is that holotropic breathwork, or?
Yeah, essentially.
Similar?
Yeah. Or a very similar technique to that, yeah.
So real intense, heavy breathing too.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, man.
Yeah, it is very fascinating, yeah.
I have a friend, his name's Michael. He was dealing with debilitating back pain for years, and the only way he ultimately found relief, he tried everything from movement and all the more physical stuff, was through breathwork and emotional release from breathwork. And in very similar experience to you, that released his pain that he had locked for years. And it's crazy. Just simple breathwork. Yeah,
and it is really quite simple. It's just, it can be difficult to maintain, you know. Some sessions, I mean,
absolutely,
they go for hours, but that's more on the extreme end, or more on the longer end, but yeah.
And if you were to have a conversation with someone like who you were at that time, right before you entered into that breathwork session, if they were here today and you were to try to help them get out of that frame of mind that they're in and those negative patterns, what would you tell them?
Just give them a hug, man.
Yeah. You think that was all you needed?
No, it's not all I needed, but it really goes a long way, longer than what we think. Just, hey man, can I give you a hug? Sure. Hug. And just maybe tell them that, you know, the world needs you more than what you think.
Mm-hmm.
The world needs your gifts. The world needs your voice. I know you may not believe it right now, but just hang in there a little longer and let's keep hugging a little more, you know?
I appreciate you telling that, because I think that, especially for the work that you do, coming from that place makes the message so much more impactful. Because I love this concept of a theorist versus a practitioner, and how it's the practitioners that I want to listen to, not the theorists. And having overcome those things puts you in that position where you can stand firmly on your ground and say, like, I know this because I did this myself. I got through to this point because I put in this work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing that I really have spent a lot of time on, man, is inner work. I continue to do that as well. Next week, I'm going to sit in the dark for a week.
You're going to do a darkness retreat?
Yeah.
Is that the first time?
Yeah. First time in this way for this long, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. What's the emotions? What are you feeling going into something like that?
nearsighted, a bit of nervousness and a bit of excitement and excitement and nervousness. Fear, not so much. Curiosity, but it's nervousness. Maybe underneath that there's some fear. Fear of, I'm not sure completely yet. Yeah. And I'm purposely not exploring it too much. I want to explore in the dark. Yeah.
Do you have anything you're looking to get out of that experience in particular? Or like, because a lot of times you almost need to be called to experience
I've been called for a while, for sure. Yeah. Real deep curiosity, man. I'm very curious to see what unravels for me. I just don't know. It feels very novel to me, very foreign. And it's also an opportunity to really slow down. So there's going to be vast contrast. For lack of a better term, I live a very busy life. I live a very full life. With a ton of responsibilities and commitments and exciting things and creative projects and family and friends and, and I'm not going to have any of that for a week. I'm going to be in complete, it's really an aesthetic deprivation. I was going to do it fasted, and I spoke with a gentleman, and man, the way he explained it was very beautiful. I'm like, I'm not going to do it fasted. I'm going to, because he explained it that being in the dark is like being in the womb. It's a very feminine experience. It's an opening that takes place. I really love the way he explained this. And he says, being in a fasted state, which is very familiar to me. I fast every day. I do multi-day fast. Often I've been doing it for years. It's nothing.
You did a 10-day fast?
Yeah. I've done multiple 10-day fasts. Yeah, no problem for me. Like it's not this is something that I've been conditioned to. I've done it for many years, since my 20s, right? So it's something I'm familiar with. It doesn't scare me per se. So I thought maybe it would enhance my experience. But the way he explained it, and it was really good for my ego to hear that, right? It was, man, sometimes, again, he goes, Steph, depending on who you are, it's different for everyone, but the fasting can put you in your masculine, and you can be in this conflict, and you're not really getting the benefit, or you're not getting the fullness of the darkness. I'm like, solid, brother.
That is beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing a bit. He actually said it way better than me. I said, feed me. What are you going to feed me? Tell me I'm excited to eat now. It was great because I'm always fasting. So I'm like, nourish me. And nourishment was a big word that he used. And the nourishment connected to the feminine expression. Yep. I'm like, surrendered, brother. Feed me.
Because that masculine energy, that's mission, that's drive, that's overcoming obstacles.
That's all I do in my life, man.
Yep.
So definitely, that's such a great idea. So I release the need to fast to make it harder, because that's what I usually do. Got to make it harder. I'm renowned for that. I'm working out with guys. We put a workout out on the board, and I go, why don't we just add 100 reps here and do this and another 20 minutes here? And I'm like, I'm just notorious like that. Always going to make it harder.
Yep.
Right, and I know where that comes from. It's a value and worth thing. It's like, well, if I can accomplish this and overcome this, and I'm more valuable, So surrendered. So I can't remember why we got on the darkness retreat, but
we were talking about. Now I can't remember. Essentially, we were talking about the beauty of inner work, essentially, and how much it has helped you in your own life, and still doing this inner work, and continuing to do these things.
And honestly, to be transparent, even deeper inner work than, because you asked me what I hope to get out of Darkness Retreat as well, right?
Yep.
But even, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but some of the deepest work that I do is just the conversations that I have with my wife around how we want to be better with each other, and how we make requests of each other, and the agreements that we forge, and confronting those parts of us that sometimes are unpleasant, That's deep inner work too. Yeah. It's really like getting up at a certain time and meditating. That's deep. That can be deep inner work as well. It doesn't always have to be grueling.
But it's not as sexy.
Yeah. No, it's not as, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be as sexy. It's like, when you're making investments, invest in laundromats and car washes. They're not sexy, but they got a pretty good return.
Yep.
Well, you want to look sexy, or do you want to make some money? So, and you can have both. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
But I think what I want to get from this darkness retreat, and what an intention is just really exploration. I'm very curious to see what unfolds for me.
Has that curiosity built on itself as you continue to do all this stuff? It's been 10 years now of this deep inner work, it seems like it's one of those things that it just builds upon each other.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Absolutely, man. And honestly, I started my path in deep inner work when I was a lot younger, in my teens. But I could only go so deep as I just wasn't willing and able and ready. You know, what really that deeper inner work started about 10 years ago. I call it the deep for me. You know? Yeah.
That masculine, feminine energy, you mentioned it in relation to the fasting and in the darkness retreat. And I thought that was such a beautiful example, but those concepts and having a fundamental understanding of this polarity between the feminine energy and the masculine energy, and that dance between the two, understanding what each of those energies are and the relationship between them, it is so important.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental to us being human. Those energies reside within every single one of us. Yeah. We can call them masculine energies. We can call them push-pull. We can call them, giving, receiving energies. We can call them active, passive energies. We can call them doing, being energies. Doesn't matter too much what we call them. It matters how we interact and how we relate to them. And can we apply being energy when we need to? Can we apply doing energy when we need to? You know, can we be active when we need to? Can we be passive when we need to?
The way it's been described to me is in The Way of the Superior Man, which is one of my favorite books, is the masculine energy is this like mission, this drive, and we love to watch other men or people in general on that mission. And that's why men love sports. And then the feminine energy is love. And it's why women love rom-coms. And they love the story of love and the dance of love. And just understanding that and the differences in males and females on a general level is fascinating. What else about the masculine feminine dynamic should we really understand?
I think fundamentally what's even more important than the masculine feminine polarity dynamics is often what underpins those dynamics and those expressions, and that's inner child work or our development as children. And often our development as children, and Tony Robbins speaks to this quite well actually, but our development as children will impact how we show up in relationship and what energetics are our primary energetics. Because often what will happen is if we experience abuse or trauma or pain, we wear masks to cover that pain, and sometimes we wear masculine orientated masks and sometimes we wear feminine orientated masks. And before we know it, we're adults and we don't know what mask we've got on, we don't know what the core of us is, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, dealing with those traumas and dealing with that pain at the core level can reveal a more authentic masculine and or feminine expression within the individual.
That almost becomes more of a magnet to people as well too.
Correct.
Like, yeah. It's fascinating, but you almost don't know if you're wearing a mask or how deep that mask goes. It's very hard to decipher what's you and what's the role you're playing.
That's why we need support. We're relational beings. That's why we need people in our lives to say, hey, that thing you're doing could be a little better. Could be a little different. Have you thought about that? Hiring a coach, hiring a professional, a therapist, whatever it is.
The coach is I want to, when I have the money, I want to coachify my entire life because I think there's so much value in that, right?
It's helped me, man. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on myself in that way, and it's elevated me. It really has.
For that exact reason you just described. Yeah.
Yeah, one of them, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
To really get to the core of my stuff and live a more healthier, abundant life, you know?
And you mentioned Tony Robbins, who's a fascinating guy in the world of coaching and self-development as a whole. What have you learned from him? Because he's a guy who he's almost gotten so big that he's became a legend. He's became legendified. Or I don't even know if that's a word, but people view him in a different way that they would other coaches. What have you taken away from him?
He's a very good businessman. I think he's blown up. He's blown up the space. Is the biggest in the space for sure.
For many years too.
Yeah. Look, I think I've trained under him. When I say trained under him, I've gone to his seminars and events. You know, what do I think of him? I mean, I don't know him personally, so I don't want to make a character assessment on him.
But what about those seminars? Have they been powerful? Is it something unique about his seminars versus other ones in the space? Is there something?
No, yes. I mean, the uniqueness is that he gets 10, 15, 20,000 people. Yeah. I mean, it's and there's crowds.
Yeah. And
it's an energy that comes with that, you know.
I was going to say, it's like I experienced that in Breathwork. I used to live in Miami, and there's a Wim Hof Breathwork club, and I had done Wim Hof hundreds of times on my own. But every single time I went with this group, it was the same same exact breathwork. 10, 50 times more intense.
Yeah.
Body shaking. Yeah. And it's so odd, the energetic. I can't put into words.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But anyone that's experienced that knows that you don't need to put it into words. Look, he's a unique cat in the sense that he's revolutionized the industry from a business perspective, and his teaching principles, I mean, are there some that I disagree with or that I would expound upon in a more articulate way to me? Sure. Mm-hmm. But I don't really have that much criticism about him. Not that you're asking that.
Yep.
And I really just compliment his longevity in the space as well. And I think he's a master influencer. And I don't mean that from like a place of
Machiavellian perspective.
Yeah. I mean, is there narcissism there, or is there a dark triad there somewhere? I mean, I'm not here to make a formal assessment on that. I mean, potentially, but more so, I commend his ability to influence people and get to the core of an issue. How deep it is, that I'm not sure of. Mm-hmm. But, you know, he has helped and supported many high performance individuals, mm-hmm. whether it's athletes, business leaders, politicians, etc. And so he's probably able to make a dent, and his communication is very effective.
Is there almost a necessary, like that, those dark triad traits, is almost necessary to have that desire to even do something at that scale? Do you almost need that aspect of yourself?
I've had this conversation a lot, man, in my men's group. Potentially, the answer is potentially yes. You need maybe shades of that to be not a ruthless leader, but to be a very solid, empowered leader. Potentially. It depends what type of leader you're talking about. There's so many different leadership styles and types of leaders as well. But potentially, yes, and particularly in times of conflict, if the objective is to protect and quote-unquote win, you may need that ruthlessness there in order to really achieve that. Again, there's counter-arguments to that as well, which are, well, why don't we look for peaceful measures and negotiate? Absolutely. Sometimes you can't negotiate with certain people. So you need a particular disposition that needs to be executed in order to protect your people. If we're at that level of consciousness. It's a very laid question.
Yeah.
Great question, but laid.
It was described to me in a podcast that the best leader is the healed narcissist.
Is the what narcissist?
The healed narcissist.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very interesting perspective.
Well, that's an interesting term, the healed narcissist.
It's almost an oxymoron.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm of the camp that not all, but because NPD as a clinical diagnosis is more difficult to come back from. But afflictions of narcissism, I believe, I'm of the school of thought in the camp of it can be quote unquote healed. It can be worked with. It's not a dead end, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's an interesting term. It depends on where on the spectrum.
Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you think is
lots we haven't talked about
is fundamental to your work, or just a message that you want to get across? When you say there's lots we haven't talked about today, what's the first that comes to mind?
Just what's happening in the world today, geopolitically.
It's crazy, right?
It's intense, man. It's intense. And
How do you relate that to your work? Think about that.
Yeah, I did a post on this the other day. So there's a lot to say to this, man. So I'll keep it very, very short. At some point, we as a humanity need to band together and say, okay, let me actually say it this way. You know who Ken Wilber is?
I'm not
Vaguely?
super familiar, vaguely familiar.
He's in his 70s, so he's a profound author and thought leader. And when he passes, I'm of the belief that in hundreds of years from now, or hopefully before he passes, he will be recognized as the leader that he is. He's a magical man, magical mind, I should say. And I don't want to bastardize this, but I'll paraphrase in my own words. And so he speaks to levels and layers of consciousness. And essentially, he gives an example of this. If there's a level 2 consciousness that is still entrenched in violence, and that level 2 consciousness meets a level 4 or level 5 consciousness that has transcended violence, what does that higher level consciousness do? Because they've transcended violence for their own survival and their own survivability of their own cultural group. What do?
They bring down their own level of...
Often that's what needs to happen to survive physically at the very least, right? We get stuck in this dilemma. And so I don't know if there's an easy answer and an easy alternative, man. There's part of the human condition that has been at war with itself and at war with each other because we demonized difference for so long. We've forgotten what it's really all about. And what I will say is that something needs to give. And I'm not sure what that give looks like, but something needs to give. Because there's too many innocent and non-innocent people dying unnecessarily. And again, maybe it's just part of the bigger cosmic play, and it is all necessary. I don't know.
I was listening to Tim Kennedy and Joe Rogan this week, and Tim is a former, still Navy SEAL, I believe, and
no, he's a Green Beret. I know Tim.
Green Beret.
Green Beret.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how the Russia and China both have massive budgets to try to stir up conflict and division through social media within the United States. And these two different countries that are wealthy and have the money to do so, it's causing us to divide amongst ourselves against bots. Like they want there to be people. They want us to think things are more divided than they are, which in turn makes things more divided than they are because both opinions get stronger through that. And it's scary to think about how that gets multiplied with just how social media just continues to get proliferated and use just continues to go up, and it's hard to see an end to that.
Yeah, we've got to make some changes, man, in the US, in the way that US relates to itself. I think we're coming to a point. This is a far longer discussion, but I think we're coming to a point of some meaningful change that needs to occur, and maybe the old way isn't going to work any longer.
I hope it doesn't, though, come down to what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, where it's going to take that hard fall from grace to enact change.
I hope that deep contrast isn't required.
Yeah,
in this
I
instance.
hope so. So you mentioned Ken Wilber is his name. Is his work similar to David Hawkins?
No, I think it's different. It's quite different.
When you said levels of consciousness, that's what I'm curious. What is if you were to describe Ken's work, is there? It seems like an overwhelming.
It is
very extensive,
thick as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
just talking about
nature of reality, philosophy of life. Yeah, and he's developed models out of his own thinking as well. He's integrated other models into his thinking too. Yeah, deep psychoanalysis of the human condition.
It's fascinating. There's so much to read, so much to explore. Do you have any favorites that you urge people to check out for themselves?
I'm sort of old school in the sense that I like to go to ancient texts as much as possible. So I'm a student of Vedanta, of Advaita Vedanta, specifically non-dual Vedanta. So I spend a lot of time in that space.
Can you describe what that is? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's a a way of seeing the world that is singular. So there is only consciousness and that's it. Everything else is, I don't want to say an extension of that. Everything else is
within that.
We'll just within that or an extension of that, we'll say. Yeah.
There was a quote from, I think it's Rumi, that you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the ocean in a drop. And I think that singularity was the beauty in that, right? It's like we're all kind of the same. We're all the same consciousness at the end of the day. And it brings in a lot of empathy in the world.
Can do, yeah.
Because you realize that, like, if you were in the position of Saddam Hussein, you'd probably act like Saddam Hussein. And it's just, it's interesting to take that perspective. It humbles you.
Yeah.
Steph, this was an absolute fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful you took the time to do this today.
Thank you, man. Likewise, I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, man.